All right. So there we are. So what I'm gonna ask you, where were you on the night of April? I'm okay, I'm kidding. I'm kidding.
It's an interrogation.
All right. It's not an interrogation. Like you've done this before. You're a lot more. You know what you do with the solo cast or the solo recordings? I don't think I can ever do that. Like, I think I need someone to bounce off of, like just being in front of the camera, what you do with Black Girl on Mars. Like,
Oh,
I don't know if I could do that. So that probably takes more skill than this, but shout out
oh,
to you
I
for
mean,
that.
I interview people for my podcast, so I the only time I'm solo is on Instagram. So
Also,
I'm
do you repost those Instagram posts on YouTube? Because I was on your YouTube and I was kind of like looking at some old videos.
I started there when I was trying to test them, and I did the thing with YouTube. I was like, it's all or nothing, and I was doing juggling too many things. But I think that when I did do an episode on YouTube where I was sort of reflecting about the New Year's, I had to prep that so much before I did it, because like you said, you're really just interacting with yourself and the camera.
Right.
So I never have to script things. And this one
Really?
I mean, most of the time I don't need to script things, and this one I had to sort of really outline and have thoughts set up, because I'll talk forever if I'm sitting in a room by myself. Like, I don't know,
That's
you know.
actually, I mean, you have a good I call it the pod voice. Or it used to be the radio voice, but now I call it the pod voice.
The
So
pod voice.
yeah, that's not such a bad thing.
Thank you.
Okay, all right, all right, all right. I haven't done this in a while. Listeners, if you're listening, you're probably like, oh, where's Tonga? Tonga was a guest hosting for me, and she's been doing that since I want to say November or December last year. So this is
Oh,
pretty much my first time back on the mic in like 4 or 5 months. That's why I was like confused on how to set up the volumes before the interview and things like that. But this is Nosa. You're not hearing the ghost. Um, I was on a little hiatus. You know, Tonga was holding down the fort while I was gone. But this is my first episode back in 2021. And welcome back to the Culture Class Podcast, the podcast where we get to interact with people from different backgrounds. Today, I have someone dialing in all the way from Mars, Andrea Kwamya. How's it going, Andrea?
hi. And I should tell you, it's 2022 now. We
Oh,
really were taking a
20.
break.
It is 2022. My bad, my bad, my bad. It's probably like 2027 on Mars or something like, right? Like how much more?
Yeah, I was seeing these people are talking about the difference between different calendars and how we're behind in some cultures, and it really is interesting. So yeah, in Mars we're not as far ahead as we should be, but
Yeah,
trying to
yeah.
get there.
I mean, I literally interviewed someone from Ethiopia, I want to say in 2020 on the podcast, and I was telling me how Ethiopia has like 13 months, and the days are kind of like not the same. And also, you know, the Chinese year also doesn't follow like the normal year. So even with daylight savings, so we're all just living in this whole Avenger style multiverse type thing, even in real time, and we don't know about it. It's like what's going on here is not going on over there, but it is what it is, you know. Imagine you could go back to what would be a fun year to go back to. Like if you could visit like Andrea at say maybe 5 or 10 or 16, what would be an interesting year to go to talk to yourself that, hey, you know, you're X years old now and this is what to expect or whatever, you know, that type of stuff.
I mean, I think my favorite age in general, like for myself and also for like small children, is 9 years old, around that age.
Mm,
Because I think there's this divergence of being so, you know, so ignorant, but the curiosity starts to build. So you're starting to be really self-aware, and but you're still so curious about the world, and you still don't have to deal with a lot of responsibilities. So I feel, and this is just from personal experience and observation of, you know, children in that grade. I think around that age you're still really authentically yourself, and just like looking at bugs and like, I don't know, really obsessed with things like dinosaurs or whatever it is. So
Yeah, I mean, don't let the curiosity die. Yeah, that I can agree with that. I think at 9 I was getting into high school or something, and that was kind of like because I went to boarding school, so that was kind of like okay, first year kind of like on my own type thing, and just trying to make shit happen and whatnot. But yeah, pretty interesting. And if you're listening to this, by the way, Andrea is not really Mars, just so you know. As you can see, like her audio sounds pretty clear and crisp. Um, Andrea is, how do I describe Andrea? Andrea Afua Kwamya. She's the only Black girl on Mars. That's number one. She is American with Ghanaian and Ugandan heritage. Growing up in New York, living in LA, currently dialing in from Serbia, of all places, and we're going to talk about that. Pretty interesting. DEI consultant, comm specialist, all-around superwoman, advertising experience, like professor, like, Magneto, Cyclops, everything you want to, Shuri from the Black Panther, everything you want to talk about. But welcome to the podcast, Andrea.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited for our conversation.
Most definitely. And it'll be interesting to touch on how we met. So we met through a mutual acquaintance or mutual friend, Ness, right? Who lives in Germany. I think Ness is Moroccan. She currently lives in Germany. And one of the reasons why I have Andrea on the podcast today, do a quick plug. So we have this thing we're planning called PODBREAK, right? And I was just on Wuchi's podcast yesterday. He'll probably publish that a week from now or whatever. And, we're talking about this thing, bringing African creators together. So all of us were all podcasts, like, 15 podcasts or 15 platforms, 27 different creators so far and counting. And we want to converge in Chicago on July 1st to have like a creator house that we're going to be in for like 3 days, create content together, get to explore the city of Chicago and things like that. But, I did some explaining about the purpose of the meeting, but taking it from like a podcaster's collective, like or perspective, someone in the group, what attracted you to like PODBREAK, and why did you see it as something that you'd be interested in participating in?
Yeah, that's a great question. When Ness reached out to me, first of all, she didn't really need to twist my arm. She told me that someone that she knew in the podcasting space was putting together a group for African creators to host an event in the summer. And for me, as an independent podcaster, doing everything by myself, first of all, that's one thing. You can always learn from other people, and when you're in your own bubble, you often don't see all of the things that could be improved, the areas that you could make easier for yourself, whatever it is. And then on the other side of things, in terms of our culture, our heritage, all being African creators, having worked in the marketing space in the United States for several years, I know that there are very few spaces for us. And for me, I'm always attracted to finding community with other African individuals, creatives, whatever it may be, because it's not always easy for us to find or have those opportunities.
Dope. And what are you expecting for the 2-3 days you're going to be, or 4 days you're going to be in Chicago? Like, what are you looking forward to?
I mean, I definitely am really looking forward to, I know this sounds kind of childish, but making friends. I want to make friends with other creators and hear about their experiences, what led them to make a podcast. And also for me, and we've talked about this a little bit separately, I really want to learn from people who are doing things well. And I think if before we were touching upon what would you tell your younger self, and I would really tell myself that you don't need to work in a silo all the time, that it's much more fruitful to touch in with other people, and you can still have something that's yours but will be much more fruitful.
Facts. And that's one of the purposes for PODBREAK, right? Like, first things first, we're coming together to produce content. So if you're an African podcaster living in North America, I mean, we have people flying in from Canada, Toronto, Vancouver as well. Like, come down to Chicago, July the 1st. You can send us an email or just go to the website, right? It's podbreak.org, podbreak.org, and you can donate. If you're a listener, you want to swing by, like we're going to be interacting with listeners as well during one of those days, and we're going to be learning from each other, right? Like I consider myself more logical and analytical than creative, so it'll be interesting for me as well to participate. Like I can organize a lot of things, and the way my brain works is like, okay, put all these parts together, but when it comes to using is it the left side of the brain or whatever, to be, to really emote and be creative and be in touch with and exude emotion, like I lack in that department. So kind of like learning that by osmosis, maybe it's also what I look forward to. So just each other making each other better, I guess, will be a great thing.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, we'll see. 4th of July weekend, we'll see what happens. Hopefully the house is still standing when we're done, but yeah, let's get into your background a little bit. So Andrea, Afua, Kwamya. So you're American, but you have Ghanaian heritage and Ugandan heritage. Give us a little sense of like your background. Like, who's your dad? Who's your mom? Like, how did they meet? Like, how did the concept of like Andrea come to being, like even before you were born? If you could answer that question.
Sure. Well, I mean, before I go into myself, I'm pretty sure they met at a party, but in Maryland. So I don't know if it was anything, deeply thought through. But but in terms of myself, I do call myself Ghanaian Ugandan American. In the past, it took me a long time to even add the American to the end of it, because I was so deeply in touch with my Ghanaian heritage, and it was something really important for me, especially growing up in the 90s. People were not that kind to Africans, and so I really felt the need to boast it. I needed people to know that I am Ghanaian, I'm Ugandan.
So you didn't try to hide it like a lot of people growing up in the US did, hiding their Africanness type thing. You embraced it?
Well, when we were kids, so I have 3 biological siblings. We spoke Twi and a little bit of Ewe, which are Ghanaian dialects. We used to visit there quite a lot. And so my mom stayed at home to raise us. So in my mind, I was Ghanaian, and we just happened to be living in the States. And because the people I see at home, they're Ghanaian, the concept of being American didn't really matter to me, because there wasn't a culture attached to it in my head, if that makes sense. But as I got older, I remember, I think I was 21 or something, I was sitting with my friend, and it hit me, I hadn't been home in over, like, I think at that time, over 15 years, and I hadn't been back to Ghana, and I had to reconcile that, like, it's not necessarily a bad thing that I'm from America, but it had just been a place tied with where I wasn't fully accepted, so I felt like, why do I need to attach this when people don't even like the fact that I'm African? Why should I attach that I'm American? So so in that regard, I knew a lot about Ghanaian culture. My father is from Uganda, and he came to the States very young, so he's quite Americanized. So I didn't learn much about Ugandan culture, to be honest, until I was in my late teens, when I chose to take myself to visit my extended family and learn more about Uganda. But my father comes from a family of diplomats. My grandfather was the Secretary General of Uganda, and they fled to the States when Idi Amin took power. And my mother, on my mother's side, my grandmother was part of, in Ghana, we have royal figures. It's not anything active, but she was a descendant from a royal line as well, and chose to move to the States when she was in her 20s, where they met at a party.
So the party was in the US.
Yes.
Right. So who kicked game to who? Was it your dad kicking game to your mom or your mom kicking game to your dad? What was it like? Have they told you that story yet?
I don't know that they've told the full story, but
the story my mom always likes to tell me is when my dad was a helicopter pilot for the Nigerian Air Force, and my mom's father was his boss, right? So my mom's father was in the communications department, and he'll be the one like communicating with the pilots, and he was senior in rank to my dad, obviously. So my dad went, I don't want to say AWOL, but he was supposed to be going on a mission, and he went off course to go pick my mom up from where she was taking classes. And this was like, I want to say like 9-10 years after the Nigerian Civil War. So everyone thought the war was starting again, and everyone like scattered, like ran away. But my mom saw my dad, was like, what are you doing? Like you could get into trouble, like you could get court-martialed for using military helicopters on private stuff. And he was just like, no, I just wanted to pick you up, blah, 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 that type of thing, you know. What was that type of story like for your parents?
I wish my parents were that romantic. I'm sure my mom would have loved that. No, I honestly think, wow, I hope I don't know if they're gonna listen to this, but I'm pretty sure they met at a party, and that shortly after my older sister came into the world. But that's kind of how I think about their getting together.
Party, right? Wait, there's some. Oh, sorry. Pardon me. I think there's a little bit of gain. Let me see here.
Sure.
Test.
My voice just laughed.
Yeah, it's a little grainy. I don't know. Is that? Oh, test. Say something. A, B, C, D, E. Yeah, your audio is a little grainy. I hope it's turning out well on the Zoom recording, but on my, it might just be my headphones. Maybe I need to change headphones, but
like that all the time.
I started off pretty fine, but it just started getting, it's almost like you sound half cyborgish, like you're a little bit in the Matrix type thing. But that might just be my thing, though. I hope it's okay. All right, testing 1, 2. Do you want to test your audio real quick? Let me test mine as well. Your audio and your, let me see, speaker and microphone.
Yeah.
Test.
I'll mute myself while I test.
Test. All right, so I'm fine. Just try testing yours and see as well.
There
we go.
It's better?
Yeah, we're back. What happened? Or maybe was that Zoom? Maybe it was just the internet or something.
Maybe, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. And this shit happens in podcasting, guys. Sorry about the break in transmission, but we're back talking to Andrea, Afua, Kwamya. You know, you have a pretty interesting, Afua is a pretty popular Ghanaian name, but I've never heard of, is Kwamya Ugandan or Ghanaian?
Ugandan name.
Oh, interesting.
Yes.
Yeah. What does it mean?
I don't know what Kwamya means. So the background of our last name is in my grandparents are from 2 tribes, and in my grandfather's tribe, in their culture, the firstborn son takes the name of the grandfather. So there's always sort of a like a transfer loop to continue the names. The only people that didn't continue this tradition is my family, unfortunately, but my grandfather's last name is Bigarenkia. And so Bigarenkia. And so everyone else in my family, on my dad's side, his siblings, are last name Bigarenkia, and my family's last name is Kwamya. So it's
is Kwamya your grandfather's first name or last name?
No, my grandfather's full name was Zerubaberi Bigarenkia, and so his father is Kwamya, and then it continues that way. It's really rare, and it's it's an interesting tradition because it's meant to kind of carry on the names, and technically holding his father's last name, my uncle, who is the firstborn son, is the head of the household. And these are all things that I'm still trying to understand and capture because it's a lot, but
No, no,
yes.
I'm actually impressed. I think, your dad and mom were pretty deliberate, like, just them teaching you Twi, I grew up in Nigeria and unfortunately I don't even speak Bini that well, which is kind of like my local language. But the fact that you grew up in America and are able to speak Twi and kind of like know all this history about your family and are deliberate about learning it and are not like far removed from the culture, it's pretty impressive. But I must imagine that given your situation, like, is it fair to say that growing up, like you always like consider yourself some type of outsider because you were maybe never, too Ghanaian or too American? You were kind of like, it always happens with like immigrant children, right? Like, oh, your parents came over from a different country. You don't go to your country, maybe you go back every 10 years. Americans don't really see you. Sometimes even African Americans is fully American. And, back home, when you go back, they call you American and you don't identify as Ghanaian. How was that whole thing? How did you come to terms with all that growing up?
Absolutely. And just to clarify, unfortunately, I've forgotten Tree. So we were kind of talking about the language thing where even though I accepted being Ghanaian, my parents were afraid to put us in the spotlight. So they actually stopped speaking to us. They made a decision because back then there were a lot of problems. Schools didn't, I have a twin sister, so we would sometimes speak to each other in Tree, and they didn't like that. We were actually put in a special class that we didn't realize was ESL. And when we got older, we told our parents, oh, remember that class where we had to go and everyone was speaking Spanish? And they were so mad because they didn't even know that
Right.
that we were being forced to take ESL classes, but we spoke perfect English, but it was British English. And so to say that I have reconciled with it, I would be lying. I'm still dealing with it today, trying to understand the pieces of who I am, and I think even trying to understand some of my parents' decisions, especially language, which is something I'm really interested in, where it's always the first thing that people will say to you, oh, either it will be an elder telling you, oh, you don't speak Twi, you don't respect your culture, and you're like, it's not my fault, or or someone telling you like, oh, you haven't been to Ghana in over 10 years, you're not Ghanaian, like all of these things that they're words from outsiders, but especially when you're younger, you really internalize them. And then on the other hand, I grew up in the suburbs, and you're sort of prized for being a certain type of Black person in the suburbs, whatever it means, like there's such a sense of confusion because you, as a kid, you're not seeing yourself as, oh, I'm a Black girl. You're seeing yourself as, oh, I'm here as a student too. But when people make comments about you, you start to think like, is that what's important? And I had a tendency to try and stand out less because I couldn't handle the pressure. So yeah.
I mean, that's not such a bad thing. I mean, growing up in the suburb, I mean, I can relate to that a little bit because I didn't grow up in the US, by the way. I've been in the US for 5 years, so my stories are a little different. But I can see that, and I can remember relating to Issa Rae a lot because she, like her dad was a doctor, she grew up in LA, she was this awkward Black girl, like you would say. And, she didn't fit like, like you said, like people's version of like, maybe she didn't see herself as Black. Obviously, she would be prone to a lot of the prejudice that Black people face. And maybe that's when she realized she was Black. But even within her own community, she was talking about people treating her differently because she liked lacrosse or, did things that Black people don't necessarily do, which is strange and, just feeds into that outsider mentality. But I want to say, like, I actually envy you in a way because, like, me growing up in a military family, like a lot of my emotions going to boarding school, doing all these things, parents being divorced and all that good stuff, like I learned at a very early age to not to feed into my emotions or not to show emotion, if that makes sense. So, and you might say, hey, you know, a lot of these things didn't get to you. You were always like focused on, you know, fuck these people, you're going. But later in life, it's affected me in the sense that because I blocked out a lot of emotion growing up, like sometimes my interaction with people can be a little awkward, and it takes like me meeting like maybe a special person or someone that I just gel with your energy to just like be very, you know, to go with the flow with that person. So even though like you talked about, hey, you know, it was difficult for you and you had to like do some things a little less in order not to stand out, like stand out a little less, you being in touch with your emotions that young is probably contributing to what you're doing now with all the wonderful things you're doing in your life, you know, being a creator, a podcaster, everything you're doing with DEI, everything you're doing in the comm space and everything like that. So I wouldn't see that as a negative per se. And if you were to ask me now, I know you said, you know, you're still struggling to come to terms with it. Like from the outside looking in, it seems like you're really comfortable in your skin. Like I see the way you make it. Yeah, no, I can say that because, you know, I kind of like try to research you a little bit like before the episode for questions. And you could tell that you're projecting like you want people to know this side of you, that hey, I'm a Black woman, I'm young, I'm proud of my heritage. Like if you go to your Instagram reels, you're explaining things about your culture. I mean, your moniker is the only Black girl on Mars, which I guess is an interesting story there, but you always put it in front of people, and people who try to stand out less don't do that. So I think you need to give yourself more credit that you deserve for that. But let's go into the story about coming up with that name, the only Black girl on Mars. Why not Venus? Why not, you know, Mercury or something, you know?
Well, first off, thank you so much for your comments, and I think it does, you know, self-awareness can, I was thinking about a chat we had the other day, and I was like, is there such a thing as toxic self-awareness where you're so aware of everything you're doing that you can't even take action anymore, you know? But I'm trying to live in a healthy balance. So but yeah, the only Black girl on Mars, it's a funny story. I love the name, I love the moniker, but it's quite it was a really literal translation to a situation that I was dealing with. And I've told this story before, and I don't know if it makes it hard for me to get jobs with certain people, but it doesn't matter. So I used to work at Spotify, and it was my first job out of grad school. And I was so excited, but you know how you were talking about, you know, being comfortable around certain people. For me, the trouble is still around in white spaces. I didn't realize I wasn't being myself. I felt like I needed to be an exceptional person more so than I am, but I wasn't cognizant of that. And so I was putting so much pressure on myself in those spaces, especially to be asked to work at Spotify, getting through the interview round. But the moment that they told me what I would be making, it was really low, but it was my first job out of grad school. And so I said, you know, is there any way we can negotiate this? And they said, listen, what we'll do is we're going to make you a contractor for an X, Y, and Z amount of months, and then you're going to become full-time. And after that, you're going to get the regular salary. And I don't know why. Instead of thinking like, this is BS, I was like, wow, they're doing me a favor. And that was honestly my thought. I was like, someone wants to work with me, and it's Spotify. And so I was on a team called Marketing Science. Our nickname was Mars, and I was the only Black girl on the team. And I loved the team. I loved working with the people, but it came around that time to renegotiate. And I kid you not, but my manager at the time sat me in a room and said, I know we said we were going to make you full-time and give you this salary, but I think what we should do is increase your current hourly rate by 10 cents. I was like, what? I was the only person on the team with my master's. I was a lead insights analyst. I was doing presentations in front of the whole company one time on a day where even the CEO was also presenting. I was traveling to London for them. And, you know, I'll say it on here. I was making like 60K. And so I told them, I was like, give me a week before we meet again. And I went and I started asking people who are comfortable to please tell me what they're making, because I have the online data, whatever, the public data, but you know, I wanted to know in-house what's going on. And so I asked people who started the same week as me. I asked people who were, you know, junior to me. They were all making more than me. They were all making on average 23% more than me. And so that's when I went back, and no matter how much I fought, even with the diversity office, HR, no one, you know, they said I didn't have a case to come on board because I agreed to be a contractor. And so I went home that night feeling like, oh, like really dejected. And I just was listening to David Bowie on repeat, and the song that was on was Life on Mars. And I literally was in bed crying, and I was like, I'm the only Black girl on Mars. And amongst my, feeling my emotions, I was like, I never want this to happen to another Black woman in the industry again. And I thought to myself, it would be such an amazing idea to start a podcast. And I had that idea maybe 2.5 years before I pulled the trigger. But I'll be honest, my experiences at other corporate companies were not that divergent from that experience there. As much as I loved the people, there was no deeper respect for me, no matter what I did or what I did for them. So, yeah.
Man, US capitalism really has a weird way with you just labor and employment, a weird relationship, I'd say. Like and I can relate to your story a little bit because my brother used to work for a subsidiary of Exelon, right? The utility company. And it was the same thing, like, come on as a contractor and, do this, do this. And funny enough, the week he got another job was when his boss was trying to, say, hey, do you want to, I was like, dude, I have another offer, like I'm gone, type thing. And, it's just strange, like working as a contractor, not being valued, like where I used to live in Lagos, Nigeria, or in Nigeria as a whole, like it's not the same way in the US. Like prices are pretty much standard, right? For the most part. So if you go to a shopping store in Lagos, most likely is going to be the same price as the store for milk in Abuja, which is a capital city, except there's something drastic. Maybe there's some type of fighting going on there and logistics or something. But here in the US, you find like different Walmarts in different counties in the same state selling things differently. And even in the labor pool or employment, like people on the same skill. And this whole thing of negotiating your salary, like back home, like everyone was on the same, everyone had grades. They were like there was like, oh, you start from a trainee banking officer to a banking officer, senior banking officer, assistant general manager, and every skill had their their salary scale, and everyone earned the same thing, except you wanted to cross company who paid slightly higher for that same position. But here in the US, it's just very strange, this whole negotiating salary thing, and everyone being so secretive, and people employers trying to squeeze out as much as they can from employees, and there are 100 different VP roles, and you really don't know which is higher than which. Everyone seems to be parallel. It's just like a very funny situation, but taking matters into your own hands is very interesting. Obviously, with the equal pay movement, like, particularly for women in different industries, a lot of women have been asking that question. I'm not a woman myself. Like, I remember when they wanted to pay me less of my relocation pay on the offer letter, they said they were going to pay this. And then when I came, they calculated the miles from like DC to Colorado and said, oh, it was going to be X dollars per mile. So they're going to give me this, which was less than, I was like, what the fuck? Like, give me the whole thing. Like my whole budget was based off the whole thing. What are you talking about calculating? They were like, no, it's supposed to be up to that amount. I'm like, I don't give a fuck. Like that wasn't like explicitly stated. And I
Mm-hmm.
think being a man helped me in a
Mm-hmm.
sense because I put my foot down. I was like, nope, like you guys cannot do this. Like,
Right.
I have an MBA for crying out loud. You're gonna like, and this was me. Like, I didn't even have an alternative. I didn't have a bargaining chip. Like, I was gonna be on the street if they had said no, but I was still like, I'm gonna go down fighting. That they're gonna know in this company that even if I don't get this job, the next person, they're gonna be very explicit and like treat that person good. But I don't
Mm-hmm.
know. Is there something for women like that don't make them as, or what can women do, let me put it that way, to be more assertive when it comes to like negotiation with salaries and things like that? Like, do you have any tips?
Yeah, I mean, for sure. And I think you make a good point. And I think men are, if anything, encouraged even from a younger age to be able to handle themselves in uncomfortable situations. I'm generalizing completely. So if you're listening to this, like, I know not every person has that same level of confidence, but in general, when I first struggled with salary negotiation, I think I also attributed, cultural differences to it, because in our culture, we, especially to a certain age, we treat people who are older than us, with a certain authority, with a certain level of respect. And I took that so seriously that when I got into the working world, I really struggled with this realization that I'm now their peer, even if they're my boss, even if they're, a few years older than me, that I need to treat myself like their peer, in order to be able to not just think this is law. And so I bring that up first to say that a lot of people who do struggle with it, for some people it is cultural, like they don't know how to speak up. And then there's also the race aspect, is like, there are people who have really been pushed out for, and it's happened to me too, for just bringing certain things up that were unfair. So you're treading this fine line often as a woman, especially a woman of color. And so one thing that I would say is be fully aware of how you handle high pressure situations. Myself, for example, if I went back in time, I would either see if I could absolutely have a liaison to practice with, and to really practice with someone who would be really harsh with me, so that it's like getting yourself re-ingrained. Because I'm the type of person that I could prep it probably perfectly well on my own. And the second I see someone's face, like, especially if a boss is going to say no to me, I think, oh, my boss gave me a directive. Like, okay, how can I counter this? And I'm much better at negotiating now. But if they don't believe that you are willing to walk away, they don't care. They really don't
Facts.
care. Yeah.
Facts, and leaning on your strengths, like you said, this whole thing of self-awareness. Like, I love our generation so much because it's like, I want to say our generation, me being 19, shout out. But yeah, we tend to be a little more self-aware, and there are different ways to achieve different things, right? You just need to kind of like lean on your strengths and everything. And I think what happened for what helped me as well, because I was a supervisor back in Nigeria, like supervising like a team of like 13 people. So I knew that as a supervisor, I didn't know what the fuck I was doing like half the time. Like I say that lightly, but I know that like this whole era, like supervisors knowing everything, like I know there's a way to like, so I kind of like borrowed from that experience as well. But however it works for you, I guess it works for you. But yeah, like all these things you're going through, whether it's, like professionally, or how you grew up or things like that, like would it be safe to say, like, how do I put this, like, and this is something that I am also like coming to terms with, because we don't talk about this a lot in Nigeria, but mental health, right?
Mhm.
How what's your relationship like with your mental health, and how, when did you start to, you know, get more in touch with your mental health, and what were some of the things you do every day? I know it's a ongoing battle for everyone, but what are some of the things you do every day to kind of like better your mental health?
Yeah, for sure. I would say that I've been pretty aware of my mental health needs from a really, really early age. Depression runs in my family, and my parents are also divorced, so living in a high tension household, and also just the pressure of being a young, the kids in an African household, like doing well in school. I think my first experience realizing that I had some uh, issues with depression was when I was between 7 to 9, honestly. And
Sorry, was when you're between 7 and 9 years old. Okay, got it.
Yeah. So and it's also, of course, now that I'm older, I realize a lot of those emotions were tied to they were contextual. So there were a lot of things going on in my life that now I could look back and be like, oh, that makes sense why I would be sad or stressed out, but now that I'm older, and I struggled with a lot of depression in college, and just putting so much pressure on myself to be successful, to do everything, to be on top. And I've been able to come out of that and heal. But like you said, the healing process is always a continual journey. So now I really am learning more about myself, and the things that I think are key to my health is I need to live somewhere that's sunny majority of the time. It sounds so small, but but honestly, if there's a cloud over my house, I could feel the difference in my personality just from a little bit of darkness. I need sun. It makes me, I just feel so much more hopeful. I'm in Serbia now, and one of the reasons I came here is because I have personal connections here, but in terms of the culture, people go outside, they go for walks every day, they take a moment out of their day to just have a coffee with their friends in the middle of the day. Work isn't everything, your friendships, your family is something that is really put as a primary. And I honestly, living in New York City and then living in LA, I didn't know how to do that anymore. I really didn't understand how to be that way. And so coming here was sort of like a mental training for me, because I would, when I first moved here, I'd have friends who text me, be like, have you gone outside today? And I'm like,
wow.
on my computer, and it's just really standard to go outside for a little walk. And it seems so small, but you do realize your whole mood, your whole vibe is different when you come back. You just feel a little bit more hopeful. And I'm not minimizing like severe depression, because I have been there, but just to answer your question about some smaller just maintenance things. And tea, I'm addicted to tea.
Tea and sun. Okay, those are very achievable things. Like, it's what if I may ask, like, not to get too deep, but what are some of the ways like depression like showed up? Like, people kind of like show that in different ways. Would you just kind of like avoid people? Would you be alone? Would you find yourself doing compulsive things? Like, how'd that show up for you?
So I'll talk about really severe, when I had severe depression. And I would say I'm several years on the other side of recovery from that. So, and then I'll talk about what I would say maybe when you have people who have standard depression and they feel blue, I can talk about that. So in terms of, just to start with the lighter things, when I'm not feeling well now, yes, I can be a little bit avoidant. I'm technology avoidant, so maybe I won't. I just keep my phone on silent because I have a little bit of anxiety just hearing the notifications. so I get, when I am starting to feel blue, I'll know because I start to get a little bit of low grade anxiety, start to wonder why things aren't going well, or maybe I'll feel like I can't see people or talk to people. So it does force me inside my house more, because you really can't go on a walk without seeing people, and I think that another thing that it does, I'm not much of a crier unless something has happened. But I think everyone has their vices, and something that they start to do, whether or not it's for some people drinking, some people it's eating. For me, when I am feeling low, and one way I can tell that I'm not fully in my best space is when I just start to binge some type of visual program, whether it's like anime or YouTube, but I've given up YouTube and TV for Lent, which still leaves anime, but so those are the lighter ones. And so it's just kind of how it's, like you said, avoiding things and blocking your time, so you're not allowing yourself to think or feel. But then for me, when I was having the darker days, let's call them, when I was in my early 20s and I had really severe depression, I really struggled to get out of bed. There was one point in time where I was feeling such a level of paranoia where on campus, I couldn't have anyone walking behind me. I couldn't have anyone in the vicinity of walking behind me, which was really bad. And sometimes it would cause me to be late to class, like 40 minutes late to a class, just because I didn't want to see anybody behind me. It was a strange, very specific thing.
And you went to college in New York, right?
I went to college in upstate New York. I went to Ithaca College, and I went to grad school at Columbia University. Mm-hmm.
So
So
you see how she said that with a little bit of sass. I mean, I went to
I
went to Columbia, you peasants. Like, what are you talking?
Help me pay my student loans, you peasants.
Right. Shout out Spotify for helping with that one. And good thing that when you left Spotify, you helped us tweak some of the algorithms for Afrobeats. Good job. I know, wink. I know you admit to it, but shout out to you for furthering the cause on that front. But yeah, I mean, depression is again, self-awareness with our generation. Like, I think everyone kind of like goes through this in their own way. Just again, you being self-aware, like a lot of people block these things out. Like me living in Nigeria, like still struggling to be in tune with this thing. When you mix religion with that, it's like you're not exactly sure, and you're very afraid to face a lot of demons. So what I've found is that some people that you might look at and see as very strong on the surface level are really, really maybe hit the hardest, late at night or whatever, when they're going through their shit. But some people that people might say, oh, why are you talking about this every time? Or, why are you, doing all these rituals to get yourself? Are the people who are all healthy, to be honest, and, late at night, they're still, either like the same level. They don't have this like two-faced personality and everything. But yeah, I mean, living in Europe definitely helps. A lot of sun there. Obviously not as crazy as Americans. But Serbia, like, how in the hell did you get to Serbia? Like, it's like I don't know, like it's like New York, LA, Serbia. How'd that happen? And how long have you been there?
So right now I've been here about 7 months, maybe going on 8 months. And so I would say my former partner is from Serbia, but and in New York, I had a lot of friends from Eastern Europe, a lot of Bulgarian friends who actually introduced me to the Serbs. And when I when we met, I think in 2015, back then I would visit Serbia, and he would stay in New York. So we would balance the time. And now his family is really close friends to me because a couple years ago, my older sister was in a bad car accident. At the same time, his brother was had a bad, health scare, and then unfortunately, we lost someone that's close to us. So a lot of it was,
Sorry to hear that.
yeah. Thank you so much for saying so. So in the beginning, I was between two minds because what this all started as was the person that we lost. We had a little bit of a language barrier, and many years ago I had tried to learn Serbian so that we could connect, and we used to talk to each other on Google, Google Translate, and out of honor for her, I started learning, and I realized that I was really engaged. I was actually really interested in continuing to learn, and it had been, speaking about depression, I had been struggling, especially when working with corporate, in keeping passions, things that really interested me. I didn't have any energy outside of work when I was still in the corporate world, and so when I was really studying hard and learning Serbian, I think it's been a year since I started, I was like, I need to take this seriously, because I'm always trying to find that feeling again, like that I'm passionate for something. So I came here not only to pay my respects, but also just if something told me that I need to come here and discover something about myself. So this is my first time living here on my own. It's all not been a full year, but almost a year. And so it just really taught me how to slow down. When I was living in the States and I wasn't doing a lot of things, I felt so guilty all the time. And here, I don't have to feel guilty because it's not the same. There's not the same prioritization of, hustle.
Yeah, like Europeans, like I say, live life, don't work yourself to death and alienate yourself from your family, that you wake up one day being 60. But that's pretty interesting. What's one phrase you can say in Serbian? What's my name is Andrea, I'm on the podcast, or whatever word you can teach us today.
Okay. Zovem se Andrea I
Oh,
imam
wait. You got to take it slow now. All right. Like, dial it back. Take it slow. All right, let's go.
These teachers don't listen.
All right.
So Zovem se. Zovem se is what I would say for my name. So, or I am called. So Zovem se Andrea,
Oh, and she has an accent. Look at that. Okay.
And then I am on a podcast.
Nice to meet you. Let's say nice to meet you or something. Zovem se Nosa. What's nice to meet you?
Drago mi je. So
Drago mi. Did you just threaten me? What the hell? That sounded so threatening. What is going? What in the Ivan Drago is going on? But sorry, I can't say that again. My bad.
Drago mi je. So you could say Drago mi je, and then in response to someone saying Drago mi je, you could say imeni. So like me as well. Yes.
Someone saying Nosa Drago mi. All right. How close is Serbian language to Russian? How close is it? Because my barber is Russian. I wonder if I could say that phrase to him and if he'll know what I'm talking about.
I'm not sure, but they have some words that cross over. Like if you say good day, dobar dan, I'm sure they'll understand, or words like stravo, which are health. But I don't know much about Russian, so I don't want to make lies. So I don't want to lie.
Right.
But yeah, they share some similar letters in their alphabet because they have a separate alphabet. But Russian has different letters that Serbian doesn't have. Yeah.
Man, you're living a full life, Andrea, and it's admirable. Like, not only with your background in the corporate world, but you started your own business. You've now lived in another country for a number of months. You've taken on that risk in touch with your mental health. I think you're living like a very admirable, rounded life. Like, what's in
Mhm.
the future for Andrea? Like, what do you see yourself kind of like doing 5 years from now?
Mm, I I love that question. I mean, only because I was trying to visualize yesterday, so maybe that's why I don't feel as stressed about it. But um, I it's funny you say that I'm living a rounded life. I think I do have moments where I go back and I think about what my life could have been if I stayed in corporate, and I do have those weak moments where I'm like, I'm off track. And I just I'm starting with this to tell anybody who's doing something that's outside of their scope, their own scope of what they consider the norm or the expectation to be, is that if it feels like you need to be going a different direction, please do not be afraid and keep talking to your friends and family when you do get those cold feet, or talk to the ones that are supportive. um, in terms of my future, I have, I think the one thing that all of my friends and family hear from me say all the time is like, I have a new project idea. And my goal is to really focus on a few things. So that's going to be the podcast, that's going to be career coaching, and something that you and I have talked about, which ties into a lot of our conversation today, which is literally going to my family, going to Ghana, going to Uganda, and documenting what my culture is. And so I see it as a documentary, and I'm already talking to people about getting grants, and worked with a potential director on outlining, because when we were talking about our culture before, and I said, I'm still reconciling with it, I feel like I really need to go on this journey, and I want other people to see what that life is like, being a triculture kid, a dual culture kid, and trying to understand who you are. We already have so many pre-expectations on who we should be just from one culture, where you grew up or what people are telling you on the media. Now add several more, and then your
Mm.
own personality. It's so much to grapple with. And so in 5 years, I hope to choose a country to live in. I hope that this
Ooh.
that's a big one. I hope that the podcast will grow, and that my documentary will be completed, and that I'll be closer to answering some of my, you know, self-worth questions, we'll say.
Yeah, that's dope, and I can't wait to see it. You seem really confident, and that's very admirable. I did little shimmy there. I saw that. Yeah, like no doubt in my mind that you're gonna achieve all those things. And obviously, like it was great to kind of like plug in at this point of your journey. And thank God we have this on video, so I can show this to you 5 years from now. Like, remember we were
Mm,
talking about, that whole thing. Like, hey, take a look. So, do you
yes,
have
on
any
the
idea what
Sundance
your
carpet.
project? Do you have any idea what your project is going to be called, or you want to keep that close to the heart for now?
Right now, I don't know what the official name is. Right now, I'm calling it Returning to My Roots.
Mm,
Um, but we'll see if I come up with something splashier that's just as clear. But I think this is the easiest way for me to understand, and just to not forget what this project is. That at the
facts.
core of it, it's returning to my roots, and it doesn't mean that I'm going to like everything I find, but it doesn't mean that I'm going to answer all the questions about myself. But it's a fact finding mission, so that I can, you know I my brother, my cousin in Ghana had a birthday today, and I told him, send me pictures of the
Yo.
babies, his family. And I they're growing teeth. And I was like, I'm not there to be an aunt. I don't see them grow up. And I just
You want to get bit? Is that what is that your plan, to get bit in Ghana?
I just want to be there for moments that I'm missing, because I'm spending too much time in my head trying to figure out the answers, and now I just have to go and do it. Yeah.
Dope. I mean, Ghana is an amazing place. I was there for 3 months this summer of 2018, all over the country. Like I went to Lee, I went to Amezofe, I think, Kakum, Elmina. Like I just toured around, man. Like it was great. And you know, I look forward to have, you know, there's something about purpose, right? Like I was reading, was I reading a book or listening to a podcast? Anyway, I was consuming this thing about how some of the soldiers in World War II strip people, like in the concentration camps, how they strip people of purpose. Like they would tell like prisoners in the camps to kind of like move like bags of salt or sand or whatever from one end of the camp to the other. And this were like, you know, maybe 1,000 bags, you know, being moved by 10 men. So it will take them the whole day to move it. And like at the end of the day, when they moved the last bag and they were like, oh, they've achieved something, that all the bags that were on that side are now on this side, the soldiers will now say, okay, now move them back, type thing. And that was like an exercise to break their spirit. Like they had the energy to move the bags, but because they had been stripped of purpose and say, look, what is like, oh, we thought we're moving these bags here because we know we're going to build some type of bunker or something. You know, we had a purpose, but now it seems like this guy just wants us to be moving bags every day back and forth. It's a very purposeless mission, and that broke their spirit even more than the labor of carrying those heavy bags. So I say that to say, you discovering your purpose and where you want to be in 5 years, and your walk to discovering more and more of your roots, and you being self-aware of everything you're doing right now, and even sharing some of that with Black women, is very, very admirable, because that's not a common thing in the world. Like you might not be all the way there, like none of us are, to be honest, but you just identifying what your purpose can be or is, or part of your purpose, is very admirable. And like I said, like hope to be there in 2027, you know, chopping it up. You know, you probably, I'll be drinking a beer, you can be sipping your tea. It's gonna be sunny anyway, but I'll be drinking beer.
I'll have a beer for sure.
Oh, there we go. There we go. Oh, you know, imagine if beers are like tea bags and like you dip a beer in water and it turns to beer. That'll be interesting.
You better patent that, Nosa.
Hey, a lot of shit running my mind, a lot of shit I have to patent, but this has been very great. Like, thank you so much. I know there are so many more sides of you. Like, you know, there's a nonprofit side of you. There's a teaching side of you. There's a businesswoman side of you that we probably would get to in another episode. Like, hopefully you can come back as a recurring guest every other month or every year. But is there anything specific you want to tell our audience, or maybe you want to talk to your future self, or I like to give my guests like time to just drop dimes at the end?
Sure. And thank you again. I feel like every time we have a conversation, it's always so insightful. I'm sure we could have recorded every conversation that we've had up until the point that we met to now. But I just, like I said to everyone listening earlier, like Nosa said, I don't have all of the answers for my life right now. And one of the things that I think I spent far too much time in the past doing was really comparing myself and thinking that there was one true path. And I think there's a really fine line between seeking inspiration from other people, where it can diverge into a place of sort of self-criticism, of pity even. And so what I would say is take the minimum of what you can and then start acting. And if you know you're someone who, even like me, can drag my feet from fear, just the fear of taking that step, find someone who will push you, find someone who knows your limits and who will say, I know that you feel like you only have this much capacity, but you have this much more. and you just have to start. And I'm saying this to you, I'm saying this to myself. You really just have to start. It can start with a conversation, but unless you take that first step, it's all just words. And we all want to be people who are making something, who are creating, and do it for yourself, not for the world. And if you can take value from that, then you'll get closer to where you need to be.
Facts. Self-awareness and community, like perfectly summed up. Like, know what's good for you, start really small, and find a community that can help you, go on to the next thing. Not communities that take away from you, but communities that add to you. Well, that's a very good way to end the podcast. But before we go, we're gonna play a game of, I don't know what I'm gonna call the game. I'm gonna call the game either or whatever. I have just two questions for you. Either
Speed
or.
round.
Yeah, it's not a question. I'm just gonna say two things, and you're just gonna choose one of them. It's just my way of being very mischievous. So, are you ready?
Okay.
All right, let's go.
Mm-hmm.
All right, you know who Umar Johnson is, right?
Mark Johnson. Am I gonna embarrass myself?
Umar Johnson. His oh man, this might not work if you don't know who he is. Okay, let me use someone else. Let me see who's there.
What's he famous for?
Umar Johnson is famous or infamous, depending on how you look at it, as a pro-Black Pan-African. It's kind of like a Marcus Garvey type. He says he's the direct descendant of Frederick Douglass. And he's kind of like, championing this whole pro-Black thing. I think he's building like a school for Black boys and girls in Philly. Some people say he takes it too far because he doesn't really support like interracial dating. And, he has some valid points, obviously wanting to advance the plight of Black people, particularly in the US, but more so globally, and, taking them back to roots, just the dashiki wearing, person that we all need. So that's kind of like summarizes him. But this might not work if you don't like have context of him in the past. But let me go on to my second question.
Okay.
Where feels more like Mars, America or Serbia?
America.
Interesting.
Do I just say the answer? Or
yeah, just say the answer. Yeah, you can expatiate on that if you want to.
Okay, to expound, yeah. It sounds so crazy to say, but I'll give a few examples. So let's take, for example, my hair. I've had my hair braided as long as I could, and I took it out recently to breathe. I have never had anyone in Serbia just stick their hands in my hair. I've never had anyone be so surprised about my full name, my last name. But in America, where there are African people, where there are Black people, people are always so shocked that we exist. In Serbia, people are like, oh, where are you from? Like they just want to know who you are. And it's so strange because I can be the only Black person in the room. And there's always going to be one person, but most of the time people are just, just so interested in who you are, what you're interested in. In the States, I always feel really like, put in a box.
Interesting. Where is Colombia? Is it in is it in Manhattan? Is it in Brooklyn? Is it in the Bronx?
Colombia is in Manhattan on the Upper West Side. Yeah.
Manhattan. Okay. Well, I was gonna blame you on you living in the Bronx, but did you live in the Bronx by any chance?
No, I've lived in Brooklyn briefly, but I grew up in upstate New York, so yeah. But
right. Got it. Well, Andrea from the block. I get what you're saying, but yeah, I mean, it's so and it's so funny why as dysfunctional or presumably dysfunctional as America is to a lot of people, like it's still like the pinnacle of like capitalism and like economic achievement. So a lot of people still put up with a lot of things. It's just like don't fuck up the money type thing. So we can sacrifice everything else. We can sacrifice race relations. We can sacrifice our mental health. We can sacrifice our physical health. We can sacrifice family, but don't fuck up the money. That's just what America lives by, like the almighty dollar.
Exactly.
But this has been pretty interesting. Like, where can people find you? Like, you want to drop your, social media handles, that type of thing?
Yes, sure. So I am Black Girl on Mars _ on Instagram. And you can find the Only Black Girl on Mars podcast on Spotify and all of the other platforms, Apple, Google, and honestly anything. I am right now editing my second season. I also had a long hiatus, just sort of focusing on myself, but I have many, like 9, 10 really interesting episodes queued up, where we'll be talking about Black arts. I'll be talking to a guest speaker we discussed the word ally, but someone who is talking about IVF treatment and anything that is related to things that affect our lives, we talk about. So if you search Black Girl on Mars, or my company's BGOM Consulting, Black Girl on Mars Consulting, you will find us just on the first search, honestly.
Dope. Wouldn't it be funny if we go ahead and do this project and sell it to Spotify? Like, the negotiation, they will be like, aha, got your bitch. You're gonna pay today.
I know. I think about those things where I'm like, oh, is it godly to think about making it big and rubbing it in your spaces?
Ain't nothing wrong with a little pettiness every now and then, because I can always say, like, I can say to your face, like, Nigeria jollof over Ghanaian jollof, because it is what it is. So, if you know the facts, it's okay to be petty.
I stay away from it
once in a while. I mean, you have to stay away from it.
Wars.
Oh yeah, thank you so much for coming on the show, Andrea, and look forward to seeing you in Chicago and just getting to be part of your journey in any way I can. For the listeners out there, it's Culture Class Podcast everywhere, cultureclasspodcast.com. I use my real name on social media, so you can probably find me anywhere as well. Not that I have anything interesting to post, but no Sayari, Instagram, LinkedIn, OnlyFans, Pornhub, wherever it is, you get your content. And till next time, you guys remember to be well. And do me a favor, guys. Like, can you guys go on Tongwa's page and just say thank you? Like, her holding down the fort for 4 or 5 months. She's really been amazing so far. So just head to her. I mean, we started this thing in the School of Communication back at American University like 3.5 years ago. So her coming back to guest host for 4 more months while I was taking a break is so selfless of her. So just tell her thank you for me. But yeah, till next episode, you guys be well.
Thanks, everyone.